All right, so today let's really get into something I think we've all probably come across at some point, right? Workplace disputes. And to help us out today, we've got some excerpts from the book Workplace Disputes: Causes, Actions, and Resolution. You know those times when things get a little tense at work or maybe even, blow up into a huge argument. But today we're going to move past just the office gossip and really get to the bottom of it.
It's funny you should say that because we always hear about these really dramatic, big disputes, the kind that you see in the news. But actually, workplace disputes can happen in all kinds of ways, and some of them are way more subtle than you might think.
So I guess, first of all, we got to work out what exactly we're talking about here, right? I know the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the ABS, has a specific definition of what a workplace dispute is.
Yeah, they do. And basically, it boils down to any time when employees refuse to work or employers stop employees from working as a way of trying to win an argument. So it's like a power struggle, but played out by stopping work.
So the classic examples would be like strikes, where employees walk off the job, or lockouts, where the employer shuts everything down. That's some pretty serious stuff.
Exactly. And those are the ones we tend to think of, right?
Mm-hmm.
But have you ever seen, say, a group of colleagues who all decide they just won't work overtime anymore? Or they start following every single rule super carefully, which ends up just slowing everything right down.
Oh, yeah, the good old work to rule. I definitely seen that one in action. So you're saying those kinds of things, those less obvious actions, they also count as disputes.
For sure. And they can cause just as much trouble, maybe even more, than an actual strike. Think about it, what happens to things like productivity and morale, even relationships with customers, if these tactics go on and on.
It's like a silent killer for businesses, really. And the book actually goes into how much these covert actions can cost a business. But before we get into the reasons why these disputes happen, I'm curious about the overall trends. Are we seeing more of these conflicts, or are they actually becoming less common?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The data from the ABS actually shows that the number of working days lost to disputes has actually gone down a lot in the last 25 years. And a lot of people put that down to the rise of enterprise bargaining.
Okay, so now I've got to ask, for those of us who don't spend all day thinking about industrial relations, what is enterprise bargaining and how has it managed to calm things down like this?
So basically, enterprise bargaining is when employers and employees negotiate agreements directly at their workplace instead of just relying on industry-wide awards. So it's all about finding solutions that work for that specific workplace and its own situation.
So it's like instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, you're getting agreements that are more tailored to each workplace. I can see how that could help reduce conflict. But are there any potential downsides to this system? I mean, there are always two sides to every coin, right?
That's a great point. And yeah, it's definitely something we should look into more. But for now, let's stick to what actually causes these disputes. Now, the ABS has put the causes into two main groups.
All right, let's hear them. What are the things that really kick off these workplace showdowns?
The first group is all about disputes that happen when they're negotiating those awards and agreements we were talking about. Basically, it comes down to the terms and conditions of employment. Things like wages, allowances, superannuation, working hours, leave entitlements, and job security, all the things that directly affect how people earn a living.
Yeah, makes sense. If people feel like those core needs aren't being met or they're not getting a fair deal, things are going to get tense. What about the second group? What else can cause problems?
So the second group is a bit broader. These are disputes that pop up outside of those formal agreement negotiations. We're talking things like worries about health and safety, threats to job security like redundancies or moving towards using contractors. And a big one here is problems stemming from decisions made by management.
Ah, yes, management. They can really make or break a workplace, can't they? I can see how that could definitely lead to conflict.
Absolutely. It's become a really big reason for disputes, especially with enterprise bargaining, encouraging direct negotiations between employers and employees. Think about things like perceived discrimination, promotions that don't seem fair, disciplinary actions that feel random, personality clashes, even just changes to how things are usually done that people don't want.
So it sounds like the style of management and the decisions they make really affect whether a workplace is going to be harmonious or a place full of conflict.
You got it. And that brings us to a bit of a scary statistic that's highlighted in the book. Staff turnover, people leaving their jobs, is costing Australian businesses something like $100 billion a year.
Whoa, that's a crazy amount of money just walking out the door.
It really is. And here's the kicker. 1 in 5 people who quit say it's because of bad management.
So bad management doesn't just cause arguments and disputes, it's actually contributing to this huge financial loss as well, like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. And it shows just how important it is to understand how those decisions managers make and the things they do actually affect the dynamics of a workplace. It's not just about avoiding disputes, it's about making a work environment where people feel valued and respected and actually want to do their best.
Okay, so now we've got a framework for understanding what causes these disputes. But what about the actions people take? Is anything fair game when a disagreement pops up?
Well, that's where we have to talk about the difference between protected and unprotected action. Commonwealth law is very clear about separating these, especially when it comes to those enterprise agreement negotiations we mentioned earlier.
So some actions are seen as legitimate tactics in bargaining, while others are totally off limits. That sounds tricky.
It can be. This protected action, as it's called, is basically a legal right to take certain actions during the negotiation of a new enterprise agreement.
But I'm guessing there are rules around this. It can't just be a free-for-all, right?
You're spot on. For example, if we're talking about a strike, for it to be protected, there's a process that has to be followed. The union representing the employees, they have to organize a secret ballot for their members, get a majority vote in favor of striking, and then give the employer at least 3 days' notice before the strike starts.
So it's not just a spontaneous let's walk out kind of thing. There's a process to make sure it's fair and transparent. What about the Fair Work Commission? Where do they fit into all of this?
Well, you can think of the Fair Work Commission as the referee in these situations.
Yeah.
They've got the power to step in if they think a protected action is causing serious damage to the wider economy or other businesses that are connected to the dispute. So they can order an end to the action and start a process of conciliation or maybe even arbitration to try and help the parties reach some kind of agreement.
So they're there to make sure things don't spiral out of control and cause unintended damage. But what about actions that don't follow these rules? The ones that fall outside of this protected action category?
Well, those are called unprotected action, and they can have pretty serious consequences. Imagine, say, taking industrial action before an agreement has run out, or going on strike without giving proper notice. Those actions are considered illegal and can get either the employees or the employer into a lot of trouble. We're talking potential legal action, having to pay compensation, maybe even big fines.
It sounds like knowing the difference between protected and unprotected action is pretty crucial for anyone who's involved in these negotiations, both to stay on the right side of the law and to avoid any nasty surprises.
Absolutely. And sometimes, even when everyone is trying to follow the rules, things can still get really messy and complicated. A great example of this is a case mentioned in the book, which involved the Maritime Union of Australia, the MUA, back in December 2017.
Okay, let's hear it. I always find that real-life examples help to make these concepts a bit more concrete.
So this case was all about a picket line that the MUA set up at Melbourne's web dock. They were basically blocking shipping containers from getting in or out. And it all started because a dock worker was fired for not having a maritime security identification card.
So no security card, no access to a secure area. Sounds pretty straightforward. What's the problem?
Well, the thing is, this particular worker had a criminal record from about 20 years ago. And the company said that's why he couldn't get the card.
Punishing someone for something that happened that long ago does seem a bit harsh, especially if he'd had the card before.
And that's exactly what the union argued. They said the real reason he was fired was because he was active in the union and he'd complained about bullying at work. Apparently, there were 21 other workers who also didn't have the card, but they weren't facing any consequences.
So it went from being a simple security issue to a big fight about alleged discrimination in union rights. A real power struggle.
Exactly. And the picket line went on for 2 whole weeks before the company finally agreed to give the worker his job back. But even though he was paid during those 2 weeks, he didn't actually go back to work until another court case finished in 2018.
Wow, that's one tangled web of conflict.
It really is. And this case is a perfect example of just how complicated these disputes can be, especially when you add in things like union involvement, claims of discrimination, and the effects that industrial action can have, not just on the people directly involved, but also on the wider supply chain and the whole economy. It's rarely a simple black and white situation.
So as we've gone from dry definitions to this real-world drama, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners so far?
I think the biggest one is that workplace disputes can take so many different forms. We tend to focus on strikes and lockouts, but those more covert actions can be just as disruptive, maybe even more so, and they can really hurt a business's bottom line.
And we've seen how the reasons behind these disputes can range from basic disagreements about pay and conditions to the huge impact that management can have, either making things worse or actually helping to prevent conflict.
Absolutely. And understanding the legal side of things, that difference between protected and unprotected action, is so important for anyone who's dealing with workplace negotiations.
It's a lot to take in, but I think it's really essential knowledge for anyone in today's work world, whether you're an employee, a manager, or just someone who's trying to make sense of it all.
I couldn't agree more. And as we move forward, I think it's time to shift our focus from just reacting to disputes to actually trying to prevent them. I mean, we've seen how expensive and disruptive they can be. Wouldn't it be better to create workplaces where these conflicts are less likely to pop up in the first place?
That's a great point. It's about moving from a reactive mindset to a proactive one. Instead of just putting out fires, we're designing workplaces where those fires are less likely to even start.
Exactly. So if we think about today's work landscape, which is changing all the time, it brings up a really important question. What are some new and innovative ways to lead that could actually stop these conflicts from happening in the first place?
That is a fantastic question. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it all starts with realizing that the old way of managing the command and control style just doesn't work anymore. We need leaders who can inspire people, who can work with their teams, and who can build trust, not just relying on those top-down tactics that seem to cause resentment and conflict.
I totally agree. We've seen just how important management is in shaping the culture of a workplace. If leaders can create environments where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to actually contribute, it seems logical that there would be fewer conflicts, right?
Absolutely. And that leads us to another really important aspect, the role of communication in preventing disputes.
I'm all ears. How can we use communication to build those more harmonious workplaces?
It starts with building a culture where people can communicate openly and honestly. A place where people feel safe to talk about their concerns, their ideas, and even their disagreements without being afraid of what will happen. It's about making a space where those difficult conversations can happen in a constructive way, so they actually lead to solutions, not just more resentment.
So it's not just about talking more, it's about talking better, with empathy, with respect, and with a genuine desire to understand where the other person is coming from.
Exactly. And that requires a change in how we think, both for leaders and for employees. It's about moving away from this idea that conflict is something to be avoided at all costs. Instead, we need to see it as an opportunity to grow and to make things better.
That's a powerful idea. It's about reframing conflict, seeing it as a chance to learn, to improve, and to build stronger relationships.
Absolutely. And in the long run, that change in perspective can be so much more valuable than just trying to keep things superficially harmonious.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground already, from the different types of disputes and their root causes to the legal side of things, and the huge role that leadership and communication play in preventing these conflicts.
It's a complex topic, but understanding these nuances is so important for anyone who's navigating the world of work today.
Well, on that note, let's delve even deeper into some specific strategies and real-world examples of how to actually build those more harmonious and productive workplaces we've been talking about.
Okay, so we're back and ready to really dig into this idea of how to actually prevent workplace disputes. Before we took a break, we were talking about needing a shift in how we think about these things, both for people in leadership roles and for employees. It's about moving past that fear of conflict and actually seeing it as a way to make positive changes.
Exactly. And that's where these new and innovative ways of leading that we touched on become so important. It's not just about putting out fires as they pop up. It's about creating a whole workplace culture where those fires are less likely to happen in the first place. So, where do we even start with that? What are some actual things leaders can do to create that kind of environment?
Well, one of the most effective strategies, and it's surprising how often people forget this, is to just ask questions. Talk to your team, talk to your colleagues, and really listen to what they're concerned about, what frustrates them, and even what ideas they have. What are the things that make their day-to-day work difficult? Which processes or policies cause the most friction? What would make their jobs more enjoyable and make them feel more fulfilled?
So it's about going beyond those surface level, how's it going chats and actually digging a bit deeper. It's about uncovering those underlying issues that might be bubbling away under the surface before they turn into big blowups.
Exactly. And once you've got those insights, don't just come in and try to force solutions on everyone from the top down. Get your team involved in the process. Brainstorm solutions together. Tap into the collective wisdom and experience of the group. You might be surprised at the creative and innovative ideas that people come up with when they feel like they have a real say in things.
This reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the whole concept of enterprise bargaining. It's about moving away from those rigid one-size-fits-all approaches and finding solutions that are actually tailored to that specific workplace and the unique situation they're in.
Absolutely. And look, while enterprise bargaining has its own set of complexities, at its heart, it's about recognizing that the people who are closest to the work, they often have the best ideas about how to improve it.
So it's about empowering employees to have a voice in shaping their own work experience. It's not
Mhm.
just about being told what to do. It's about having a say in how things are done.
Exactly. And that feeling of ownership, that sense of autonomy, can go a long way in preventing those feelings of resentment and powerlessness that often lead to workplace disputes.
Okay, so we've talked about open communication, solving problems together, and empowering employees. What other qualities do leaders need to have to build those harmonious and productive workplaces?
Well, one that's becoming more and more important these days is empathy. Leaders who can really understand and connect with their employees on a human level, they're much better equipped to anticipate and address those underlying needs and concerns that can cause conflict.
It's about seeing your employees as whole people, not just cogs in a machine, right?
Exactly. And that means understanding their individual circumstances, their challenges, their aspirations. It means recognizing that everyone is bringing their own unique set of experiences and perspectives to the table.
And valuing those differences rather than trying to squeeze everyone into the same mold.
Precisely. And another quality that goes hand in hand with empathy is the ability to build trust. When employees trust their leaders, they're more likely to feel safe, respected, and valued. And when they feel that way, they're much more likely to communicate openly and honestly, knowing that their concerns will be taken seriously.
It's about creating a workplace culture where people feel comfortable speaking up, even when they have a different opinion or disagree with something.
Exactly. And that kind of environment is so much better for collaboration, innovation, and ultimately for preventing those really damaging conflicts that can drain energy and resources and just bring everyone down.
So to recap, we're talking about leaders moving away from that command and control style to a more collaborative, empathetic, and trust-based approach. It's about empowering employees, valuing their input, and creating a workplace culture where open communication and respect are just the norm.
Precisely. And while it's definitely an ongoing journey, not a quick fix, those are some of the key things that can help us build workplaces where disputes are less likely to happen and where people can actually thrive both in their careers and as individuals.
Now, we've talked a lot about the role of leaders in preventing these disputes, but what about the employees themselves? Is there anything they can do to help create a more harmonious work environment?
That's a really good question. And it just goes to show that creating a positive workplace culture is a responsibility we all share. It's not just up to the leaders. Everyone has a part to play.
So what can we do as individuals to actually make a difference?
Well, first and foremost, it comes back to communication. Be proactive about communicating your concerns, your ideas, your perspectives. Don't wait for things to blow up or for someone else to notice that you're not happy.
So speak up, but speak up constructively. It's about finding that balance between being assertive and being respectful.
Exactly. And remember, communication is a two-way street. Just as you expect your leaders to listen to you, you need to be willing to listen to their perspective as well.
It's about going into those conversations genuinely wanting to understand the other person's point of view, even if you don't agree with them.
Precisely. And another important thing is self-awareness. Take some time to think about what your own triggers are, your own communication style, and how you typically react in conflict situations.
It's about knowing your own strengths and weaknesses and how they might play out in a workplace setting.
Exactly. And if you're aware of your own tendencies, you can start to develop strategies for managing them better.
For example, if you know you tend to get defensive when someone criticizes you, you can work on techniques to help you stay calm and open to feedback.
Absolutely. And finally, don't underestimate the power of just being a good colleague. Be supportive of your team members, offer to help when they need it, and celebrate their successes.
It's about fostering a sense of camaraderie and mutual respect.
Exactly. And that kind of positive energy can be really contagious. It creates a ripple effect that benefits everyone in the workplace.
So it seems like preventing workplace disputes is a complex challenge that requires a change in how we think, a commitment to open and honest communication, and a willingness to work together and support each other.
Absolutely. And it's an ongoing process, one that needs constant attention and effort. But the payoff is definitely worth it.
I think that's a great point to highlight. Creating a harmonious and productive workplace isn't something you do once and then you're done. It's a constant journey of learning, adapting, and growing together.
Well said. And that's the message we want our listeners to take away from this discussion. It's about embracing those challenges, looking for those innovative approaches, and working together to build workplaces where everyone can thrive.
Yeah, it's really kind of inspiring to think that, we can go beyond just dealing with conflict and actually build workplaces where those disputes are less likely to even happen. It's like a whole new way of looking at things.
It really is a shift, and it's not just about, avoiding all the negative stuff. It's about creating this really positive and supportive environment where everyone can do their best work and feel like what they do actually matters.
So for our listeners who are out there thinking, okay, this all sounds fantastic, but how do I actually put this into practice? What's one tangible thing they could do even today to start moving in this direction?
I'd say start by just taking some time to think about your own experiences at work. Think about those times when you felt really valued and respected, and then those times when you didn't. What made those experiences so different? What were the specific actions or behaviors that led to those positive or negative feelings?
It's about looking at those experiences and figuring out what we can learn from them, what worked well, what didn't work, and how can we use those insights to create a better experience for ourselves and the people we work with.
Exactly. And once you've had a good dust, think about your own experiences, start to look around you. Pay attention to what's happening in your workplace. How do people interact? How are decisions made? How are conflicts dealt with? Are there any patterns or behaviors that seem to contribute to tension or negativity?
It's like becoming a bit of a detective, noticing those subtle cues and dynamics that often go unnoticed but can have a huge impact on the overall vibe of the workplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't be shy about sharing what you observe, your insights with others. Have a conversation with your colleagues, with your manager, even someone in HR. You'd be amazed at how much positive change can happen just by raising awareness and getting people talking.
It's about taking those first steps, even if they seem really small. It's about planting those seeds of change and watching them grow.
Exactly. And remember, change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a willingness to learn and adjust as you go.
As we've been talking about all these different strategies, it's really struck me how much emphasis we've put on the human side of things. It's not just about having the right policies and procedures in place. It's about creating a workplace culture where people feel connected, respected, and valued.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from our deep dive into workplace disputes today. We can't just treat them as isolated incidents that need to be managed or contained. We have to look at the underlying factors that contribute to conflict in the first place.
Right. It's about moving from a reactive approach to a proactive one, from putting out fires to actually stopping those fires from starting in the first place. And that requires a real shift in how we think about leadership, about communication, and about work itself.
Well said. It's about realizing that people are at the heart of every organization. And when we create workplaces where people feel valued and respected and empowered to do their best, not only do we reduce those conflicts, but we also unleash this incredible potential for creativity, innovation, and success.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one message you want our listeners to walk away with?
I'd say it's this. Don't just settle for a workplace where conflict is something you have to manage or contain all the time. Aim higher. Create a workplace where those conflicts are less likely to happen at all. Embrace those new and innovative ways of leading, encourage open and honest communication, and give everyone the power to contribute to a really positive and supportive environment.
That's a great call to action. And on that inspiring note, we'll bring this deep dive into the world of workplace disputes to an end. We've covered a lot, from those dry definitions to real-world examples, and we've explored some really interesting strategies for building a better future of work.
We hope this has been as insightful and engaging for you as it has been for us. And remember, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Take these ideas back to your own workplaces. Challenge those old ways of doing things and be the one who sparks that positive change.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep those aha moments coming, and keep working to make the world of work a more fascinating, fulfilling, and yes, even harmonious place for everyone.